The smell of coffee and grease clung to Rachel's uniform as she scrubbed the last booth in the corner of the diner. Her feet screamed at her to sit down, but there were still tables to wipe, salt shakers to refill, and floors to mop before she could finally leave. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:30. Her shift had started at 6 that morning, and now, 15.5 hours later, she was finally seeing the end of it. She grabbed her tip jar from behind the counter and counted the crumpled bills and loose change. $42. Not bad for a Monday, but not great either. Still, it would cover groceries for the next few days if she was careful. Rice, pasta, some chicken, maybe a treat for Lily. Her daughter loved those chocolate chip cookies from the discount store. Rachel smiled, thinking about her little girl's face lighting up over something so simple. 3 years. It had been 3 years since David passed away. 3 years since that phone call from the hospital that turned her entire world upside down. The cancer had come fast and vicious, leaving them no time to prepare, no time to save money, no time to say all the things they should have said. He left behind a mountain of medical bills, a broken-hearted wife, and a 4-year-old daughter, who still sometimes asked when Daddy was coming home. Rachel pulled off her apron and stuffed it into her locker. Her manager, Tony, waved from the kitchen. "Same time tomorrow, Rach?" She nodded, forcing a smile. "You know it." What choice did she have? The diner paid most of their bills. Barely. But there was still rent, utilities, Lily's school supplies, and those endless medical bills that followed her like a shadow. She stepped out into the cool evening air and pulled her jacket tight around her shoulders. The walk to the community center wasn't far, maybe 10 minutes if she hurried. Her second job waited for her there. Twice a week, on Monday and Wednesday evenings, she taught piano lessons to whoever showed up. Most of the time, it was just 2 or 3 kids whose parents wanted them to learn something cultural but couldn't afford the fancy music schools across town. The community center paid her $50 a week. It wasn't much, but every dollar counted. More than the money, though, those 2 hours at the piano were the only time Rachel felt like herself anymore. Not a waitress, not a widow, not someone drowning in debt. Just Rachel, the girl who used to dream of playing Carnegie Hall, whose fingers used to dance across the keys like they were telling stories. She had been good once. Really good. Her professor at college said she had a gift, that she could go professional if she worked hard enough. But then she got pregnant during her junior year and everything changed. She and David got married quickly and she dropped out to work full-time. They were going to be a family. She would go back to school later, she told herself. Later, when things settled down. Later, when they had more money. Later never came. Now, at 31 years old, teaching basic scales to 7-year-olds at a rundown community center was as close as she got to her old dreams. But she didn't let herself feel bitter about it. Lily needed her. That was all that mattered. Sophie's fingers were still resting on the piano keys when Rachel heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, quick footsteps. A man's voice called out urgently, "Sophie, Sophie, are you here?" The girl's whole body tensed. The joy that had lit up her face just seconds ago flickered and died like a candle blown out. "That's my dad," she said quietly, pulling her hands back from the piano as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. A tall man in an expensive suit appeared in the doorway. He looked to be in his late 30s, with dark hair slightly messed up and a phone clutched in one hand. His tie was loosened, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But what struck Rachel most was the expression on his face when he saw Sophie. It wasn't anger. It was relief mixed with something that looked like pain. "Sophie, I'm so sorry," he said, rushing toward her. "My phone died during the board meeting, and by the time I got to my car and saw all your messages, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." Sophie stood up slowly. She didn't run to him or hug him. She just stood there, her face blank. "It's okay," she said, but her voice was flat. "You're always busy. I understand." Those words seemed to hit the man harder than if she'd yelled at him. He knelt down in front of her, trying to meet her eyes, but Sophie looked away. "It's not okay," he said. "I promised I'd be here on time, and I wasn't. That's not okay." Rachel felt like she was intruding on something private. She started to gather her things, ready to slip out quietly, but the man looked up at her. "Were you with my daughter? Thank you for staying with her. I'm Daniel Hayes." He stood up and reached out to shake her hand. His handshake was firm, and his hand was smooth, not the hands of someone who worked with them. Rachel noticed his watch probably cost more than she made in 6 months. "I'm Rachel. I teach piano here on Monday and Wednesday evenings. Sophie was waiting in the lobby and I invited her to sit in on a lesson." Daniel looked at his daughter, then back at the piano. "Do you play, Sophie?" For the first time since he arrived, Sophie's face showed a hint of emotion. "Rachel taught me. I can play a whole song. Want to hear it?" Something shifted in Daniel's expression. He nodded, and there was a gentleness in his voice Rachel hadn't heard before. "I'd love to hear it." Sophie sat back down at the piano, and her small fingers found the keys. She played the simple melody Rachel had taught her, making only 2 small mistakes. When she finished, she looked at her father with hope in her eyes, waiting for his reaction. Daniel's eyes were suspiciously bright. "That was beautiful, sweetheart. I didn't know you were interested in music." "You never asked," Sophie said simply, without accusation, just stating a fact. The words hung in the air. Rachel wanted to disappear. This was clearly a moment between father and daughter, and she had no business being here. She picked up her bag. "Well, I should get going. My daughter is waiting for me at home. It was nice meeting you both." "Wait," Daniel said quickly. "Can I ask you something? Do you do private lessons?" Rachel hesitated. "I teach here at the community center, but I don't usually do private lessons. My schedule is pretty packed with my other job. What if I paid you double your rate? Triple?" Daniel pulled out his wallet. I can see how happy Sophie was playing just now. I haven't seen her smile like that in months. "Please, name your price." Something about the way he said it rubbed Rachel the wrong way. She'd met people like this before. People who thought money could fix everything, could buy anything. "Mr. Hayes, I appreciate the offer, but Sophie doesn't need expensive private lessons. She needs time. Your time, not mine." Daniel looked like he'd been slapped. What do you mean?" Rachel knew she should probably keep her mouth shut. This man was clearly wealthy and important, and she was nobody. But she thought about Sophie's face in that lobby, about the way the girl had said he's always busy with such tired acceptance. She thought about her own Lily, and how even though they didn't have much, at least they had each other. "Your daughter was sitting in that lobby for 5 hours," Rachel said gently but firmly. 5 hours, Mr. Hayes. She wasn't crying because she was bored or cold. She was crying because she felt forgotten. And just now, when you came in, did you see how she lit up talking about the piano? She doesn't need me. She needs her dad to be present, to notice her, to ask about her interests and actually listen to the answers. The room went silent. Rachel immediately regretted her words. Who was she to tell this man how to parent? She was about to apologize when Daniel spoke. "You're right." His voice was quiet, almost broken. "You're absolutely right. I've been telling myself that working hard, building the company, making money, that it was all for her, to give her a good life. But I've been lying to myself, haven't I? I've been choosing work over her, over and over again." Sophie was staring at her father like she'd never seen him before. Rachel felt tears prick her own eyes. She thought about David, about how in those final weeks when he could barely speak, all he wanted was to hold her hand and watch Lily play. He would have given anything for more time. And here was this man who had all the time in the world, but was choosing to spend it everywhere except with his daughter. "It's not too late," Rachel said softly. "Sophie's right here. She's telling you what she needs. She's showing you what makes her happy. You just have to pay attention." Daniel nodded slowly. He turned to Sophie and sat down on the piano bench beside her. "Will you teach me that song, so we can play it together?" Sophie's eyes went wide. "Really? You want to learn piano?" "I want to learn whatever you want to teach me," Daniel said, and this time his voice was steady. "I want to know everything about you." What you like, what you dream about, what makes you happy. And if playing piano makes you happy, then I want to be part of that. Rachel watched as Sophie threw her arms around her father's neck. Daniel held her tight and his shoulders shook slightly. This man who probably commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar deals was crying while hugging his daughter in a cramped practice room at a community center. Rachel quietly showed them both where to place their fingers, how to read the simple notes she'd written down. She stayed an extra 45 minutes, past the time when she should have been home watching father and daughter stumble through scales together. They were terrible at first. Daniel kept hitting the wrong keys and Sophie kept laughing. But they were learning together, and that's what mattered. When Rachel finally said she really had to leave, Daniel stood up and shook her hand again. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for teaching Sophie, but for telling me what I needed to hear. How much do I owe you for the extra time?" Rachel shook her head. "Nothing. Tonight wasn't about money, but if you want to do something for me, bring Sophie back on Wednesday. Let her keep learning. And maybe you can keep learning with her." "We'll be here," Daniel promised. "Both of us." Rachel walked home that night feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Her feet still hurt and she was exhausted, but something felt right about what had happened. She'd connected a father and daughter through music. Maybe that was why she was meant to be here, teaching at this rundown community center instead of performing on fancy stages. Maybe helping people find each other was more important than applause. When she got home, Lily was already asleep on the couch. Mrs. Chen from next door, who watched her for free in exchange for piano lessons, smiled and whispered goodnight. Rachel picked up her daughter and carried her to bed, grateful for every moment they had together. She had no idea that the man she'd spoken to so boldly was one of the richest developers in the city. She had no idea that Daniel Hayes owned half the buildings downtown, that his company was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She had no idea that her simple act of kindness, her honest words, and her gift of music had just set something in motion that would change all of their lives. All she knew was that she'd helped a little girl smile again. And for Rachel, that was enough. Rachel pushed open the heavy doors of the community center. The lobby was mostly empty except for old Mr. Patterson dozing in his usual chair near the radiator, and a teenage boy scrolling through his phone while waiting for his basketball practice to start. She headed down the familiar hallway toward the small room in the back where an old upright piano sat against the wall. But something caught her eye. In the corner of the lobby near the water fountain, a young girl sat hunched on a plastic chair. She looked about 9 or 10 years old, with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail and a designer backpack clutched against her chest. Even from across the room, Rachel could see the girl's shoulders shaking. She was crying, Rachel's heart squeezed. She knew that look, that loneliness, that feeling of being forgotten. She changed direction and walked slowly toward the girl, not wanting to startle her. "Hey there, sweetie," Rachel said softly, crouching down to the girl's level. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up with red puffy eyes. Mascara, probably stolen from her mother's bathroom, was smeared down her cheeks. She tried to wipe her face quickly, embarrassed to be caught crying. "I'm fine," she mumbled, but her voice cracked. Rachel sat down in the chair next to her. "You don't look fine." "I'm Rachel. What's your name?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Sophie." "Nice to meet you, Sophie. Are you here for one of the classes?" Sophie shook her head. "I'm waiting for my dad. He was supposed to pick me up at 5. She glanced at the clock on the wall. "It's almost 10 now. Rachel felt anger flash through her chest. What kind of parent leaves their kid waiting for 5 hours? She kept her voice calm, though gentle. "Have you called him?" "Like 100 times. He doesn't answer. He's probably in another meeting." Sophie's voice was thick with hurt and resignation, like this wasn't the first time this had happened. "He's always in meetings. Always too busy. He promised this time would be different, but he always promises." Rachel reached out and squeezed the girl's hand. Sophie's fingers were cold. "I'm sure he's on his way. Sometimes grown-ups lose track of time when they're working. It doesn't mean he doesn't care about you." Even as she said it, Rachel wasn't sure she believed it. 5 hours was more than losing track of time. But she couldn't let this child sit here alone, drowning in sadness. "Hey, I have an idea," Rachel said, standing up. "I teach piano lessons in the back room. My student should be here any minute. Would you like to come sit with us? It's warmer back there and way more interesting than staring at this lobby." Sophie looked uncertain. "I don't know how to play piano." Neither did I when I first started. Everyone has to begin somewhere. Rachel held out her hand. Come on. Your dad will probably show up any minute and someone at the front desk can tell him where you are. But until then, you don't have to sit here alone. After a moment, Sophie took her hand. Rachel led her down the hallway to the small practice room. The piano sat there waiting, its wooden surface scarred and scratched from years of use, but still beautiful in Rachel's eyes. She turned on the small space heater in the corner and pulled up 2 folding chairs. Her student, a shy 8-year-old named Tommy, arrived right on time with his mother. Rachel went through the lesson as usual, helping Tommy work on his finger placement and rhythm. But she kept glancing over at Sophie, who sat quietly watching. Her tears finally stopped. When Tommy finished and left with his mom, Rachel expected Sophie to go back to the lobby. Instead, the girl stayed in her chair, staring at the piano with curious eyes. Want to try? Rachel asked. Sophie bit her lip. Really? Come here. Sophie moved to the piano bench like she was approaching something magical. Rachel sat next to her and gently guided the girl's fingers to the keys. This is middle C, she said, pressing the note. The sound filled the small room warm and clear. Everything starts from here. For the next half hour, Rachel forgot about her aching feet and her exhaustion. She taught Sophie a simple melody. Just 5 notes, repeated over and over until the girl could play it without help. And when Sophie played those notes all by herself, her face transformed completely. The sadness melted away, replaced by something Rachel recognized instantly. Pure joy. I did it. Sophie breathed, her eyes wide with amazement. I actually played music. Rachel laughed, and it felt good to laugh. You did. You're a natural. How does it feel? Like magic, Sophie whispered. They sat there together at the piano, 2 people from completely different worlds, connected by 88 keys and the universal language of music. Rachel showed Sophie another simple song and then another, and Sophie soaked it all in like she'd been thirsty for this her whole life. Neither of them noticed the man standing in the doorway, watching them with an expression of shock and something that looked almost like grief. Wednesday came faster than Rachel expected. She'd spent Tuesday pulling double shifts again at the diner, her mind occasionally drifting to Sophie and Daniel. She wondered if they'd actually show up. Rich people made promises all the time that they didn't keep. She'd learned that the hard way over the years. But when she walked into the community center that evening, Sophie was already there, sitting in the same plastic chair in the lobby. This time, though, she wasn't crying. She was smiling, her backpack beside her, and she jumped up the moment she saw Rachel. You came back, Sophie said, running over. Of course I did. This is when I teach, Rachel said, confused by the girl's enthusiasm. The question is, did you practice what I showed you? Sophie nodded so hard her ponytail bounced. Every single day. My dad bought a piano. Like a real one. It was delivered yesterday and we've been practicing together every night before bed. He comes home at 6 now instead of 9. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. He bought a piano? Just like that? Well, he is my dad, Sophie said, as if that explained everything. Then she added more quietly. He says he's trying to be better, to be present. He keeps using that word you used. Something warm spread through Rachel's chest. Maybe her words had actually made a difference. Maybe Daniel had really heard her. Where is your dad now? Parking the car. He's coming in. Sophie grabbed Rachel's hand. Come on, I want to show you what we learned. They walked to the practice room together, and Sophie immediately sat at the piano. Her fingers moved across the keys with more confidence than Monday night. She played the simple melody, then another one, making only a few small mistakes. Rachel was impressed. The girl had natural talent. That's wonderful, Sophie. You've been practicing hard, haven't you? My dad helped me. He's not very good yet, but he tries really hard. Sometimes he plays the wrong notes and we both laugh. Sophie's whole face glowed when she talked about it. He even canceled 2 meetings yesterday so we could practice longer. Rachel heard footsteps and turned to see Daniel in the doorway. He looked different than he had on Monday. Less stressed. He was wearing jeans and a regular button-down shirt instead of a suit. He looked younger somehow, and there was something lighter in his eyes. Hi, Rachel, he said, holding up 2 coffee cups. I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, so I got one with cream and sugar and one black. Take whichever you want. Rachel blinked in surprise. Nobody had bought her coffee in, she couldn't even remember how long. Thank you. Cream and sugar is perfect. She took the cup and the warmth felt good in her hands. Daniel sat down in one of the folding chairs, clearly planning to stay for the lesson. Rachel felt a bit nervous with him watching, but she started teaching Sophie some new techniques. How to curve her fingers properly, how to use the pedals, how to feel the music instead of just playing notes. What surprised Rachel was that Daniel didn't just sit there scrolling through his phone like most parents did. He watched everything, asked questions, even took notes on his phone about things to practice with Sophie at home. When Rachel demonstrated something on the piano, he leaned forward to watch her fingers, genuinely interested. "You're really good," Daniel said during a break. "I mean, I don't know much about piano, but even I can tell you're talented." "How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 6, Rachel said. My mom worked as a maid for a wealthy family, and they had a piano no one used. The lady of the house let me practice on it whenever my mom brought me to work with her." "Did you study music in school?" Rachel hesitated. She didn't usually talk about this part of her life. "I went to college on a music scholarship. I was going to be a concert pianist. That was the plan anyway." "What happened?" Daniel asked gently. "Life happened. I got pregnant with my daughter during my junior year. My boyfriend, David, and I got married. I dropped out to work full-time. We were going to have a family, you know. I figured I'd go back later." Rachel shrugged, trying to keep her voice light. "Then David got sick, cancer. It took him 3 years ago. Left behind a lot of medical bills and a little girl who needed her mom. So here I am, teaching basics at a community center and waiting tables at Eddie's Diner." The room went quiet. Sophie was looking at her with wide, sad eyes. "I'm sorry about your husband," the girl said softly. "Thank you, sweetie. But you know what? I have my daughter, Lily. She's 7, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me, so I don't regret any of it." And as Rachel said it, she realized it was true. Despite everything, despite the struggles and the exhaustion and the bills, she wouldn't trade Lily for anything. Daniel was quiet for a moment, then said, "Your daughter is lucky to have you. You could have been bitter about how things turned out, but instead you're here teaching other people's kids, being kind to strangers. That takes real strength." Rachel felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to compliments, especially from people like Daniel. "I just do what needs to be done. That's what parents do." "Not all of them," Daniel said quietly, and Rachel knew he was thinking about his own choices over the past few years. They continued the lesson, and Rachel showed Sophie how to play a simple duet. She played one part while Sophie played the other, their hands moving across the keyboard together. When they finished, Sophie clapped her hands in delight. "Dad, can we do that? Can you learn my part so we can play together at home?" "Absolutely," Daniel said. "Rachel, would you mind showing me?" For the next 20 minutes, Rachel taught Daniel the melody she'd been playing. He was terrible at first, missing notes and losing rhythm, but he kept trying. He laughed at his own mistakes, which made Sophie giggle. Rachel found herself laughing too. There was something endearing about watching this powerful businessman struggle with something as simple as a children's song, but refusing to give up. When they finally played the duet together, father and daughter, it was messy and imperfect, but it was also beautiful because of the joy on their faces, the way they looked at each other when they hit the right notes at the same time. After the lesson, as Rachel was packing up her things, Daniel cleared his throat. "Rachel, I wanted to ask you something. Actually, I wanted to offer you something. Mr. Hayes, I already told you I can't do private lessons. I don't have the time. That's not what I'm offering. Just hear me out, okay?" Daniel pulled out his phone and showed her something on the screen. "This is my company, Hayes Development. We build commercial real estate mostly, but we also do community projects. I've been thinking about what you said on Monday, about being present, about what really matters." Rachel wasn't sure where this was going. She nodded for him to continue. "I want to start a music program, a real one. Free lessons for kids whose families can't afford them, scholarships for talented students to go to music school. I want to create opportunities for kids like you were, who have gifts but not the resources." Daniel looked directly at her. "And I want you to run it." Rachel stared at him. "What? I'm not qualified to run a program like that." "You're more qualified than anyone I know. You understand what these kids need because you've been there. You care about teaching not just because it's a job but because music matters to you." Daniel's voice was earnest. "I've already talked to my board. They love the idea. We're ready to fund it. We could renovate this community center, bring in good instruments, hire more teachers. But I need someone who knows music, who knows struggle, who genuinely cares about helping people. That's you, Rachel. But I'm a waitress. I teach piano twice a week. I'm not some professional program director. You're someone who spent 5 hours with a crying kid she didn't know because it was the right thing to do. You're someone who told a stranger the hard truth he needed to hear, instead of just taking his money. That's the kind of person I want leading this. Daniel pulled out a folder and handed it to her. This is the salary we're offering. Take a look. Rachel opened the folder and nearly dropped it. The number on the page was more than double what she made from both her jobs combined. For a year, this is too much, she whispered. It's fair pay for an important job. Think about it, Rachel. You could quit the diner, spend real time with your daughter, and you'd be helping hundreds of kids just like Lily, just like you were, kids who deserve a chance. Rachel's mind was spinning. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. Daniel looked at Sophie, who was playing random notes on the piano, humming to herself. Because you gave me my daughter back. Monday night, I realized I'd been losing her piece by piece, and I didn't even notice. You helped me see what I was doing wrong, and you did it with kindness. Now I want to pay that forward. I want other kids to have someone like you in their lives. Rachel felt tears burning in her eyes. She thought about Lily, about being able to pick her up from school instead of having Mrs. Chen watch her, about being able to buy her new shoes when she needed them, instead of waiting until the old ones fell apart. About teaching music not just 2 hours a week, but every day. About making a real difference. Can I think about it? She asked. Take all the time you need, Daniel said. But Rachel, I really hope you say yes. Rachel couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling while Lily snored softly in the twin bed next to hers. They shared a bedroom in their tiny 2-room apartment because that's all they could afford. The folder Daniel had given her sat on the kitchen table like it was calling to her. She kept thinking it had to be some kind of mistake. Or maybe a joke. People didn't just hand you a better life on a silver platter. There had to be a catch, something she wasn't seeing. At 2 a.m, she finally got up and made herself tea. She opened the folder again and read through everything. The job description, the salary, the benefits, health insurance, dental, vision, things she hadn't had since David died. The program would start small, just at this community center. But Daniel's company planned to expand it to 3 more locations within 2 years. She would be in charge of hiring teachers, selecting students for scholarships, organizing recitals, managing the budget. It was a real job, a career, the kind of opportunity she'd stopped dreaming about years ago. But what if she failed? What if she wasn't good enough? She was a waitress who taught piano on the side, not some fancy program director. What did she know about running anything? The doubts circled in her mind like vultures. By the time the sun came up, she still hadn't decided anything. Thursday morning, she went to the diner like always. She poured coffee, took orders, smiled at customers even though her brain was somewhere else entirely. Tony noticed something was off. You okay, Rach? You seem distracted. She almost told him everything, but stopped herself. If she said it out loud, it would feel too real. And if it turned out to be too good to be true, she'd feel stupid for believing it. Just tired, she said instead. Friday afternoon, her phone rang while she was folding laundry. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello, Rachel? It's Daniel. Daniel Hayes from the community center. Her heart jumped. Oh, hi, I remember. I wanted to check in. See if you'd had time to think about the offer. No pressure, I wanted you to know that I'm serious about this. It's not some impulse decision. I've been planning this program for a week now, talking to people, getting everything in place, but it doesn't work without the right person leading it. And that person is you. Rachel sat down on the couch. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why me, really? You could hire someone with a degree in arts administration or someone who's run programs before. Why take a chance on a waitress? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you a story? Okay. When I was building my company, I had a choice. I could hire people with impressive resumes and fancy degrees, or I could hire people who actually cared. People with passion and integrity. I learned pretty quickly that skills can be taught, but you can't teach someone to care. You can't teach someone to see people the way you saw Sophie that night. Sitting alone, sad, and deciding that leaving her like that wasn't an option. That's who you are. That's why I want you. Rachel felt her throat get tight. What if I mess it up? Then we'll figure it out together. Rachel, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be yourself and to care about these kids the way you cared about Sophie. The rest we can learn along the way. I'll have my team support you. You won't be doing this alone. She looked around her cramped apartment, at the stain on the ceiling from the leak that the landlord still hadn't fixed, at Lily's worn-out shoes by the door, at the stack of medical bills she'd been slowly paying off $20 at a time. Okay, she heard herself say. Yes, I'll do it. She could hear the smile in Daniel's voice. Really? That's wonderful. Rachel, you won't regret this. When can you start? I need to give the diner 2 weeks' notice. Tony's been good to me. I can't just leave him without help. Of course. That's completely fair. 2 weeks from Monday, then. I'll have HR send you all the paperwork. And Rachel, thank you. You're going to change a lot of lives with this. After she hung up, Rachel sat there for a full 5 minutes, phone still in her hand. Had that really just happened? Did she really just quit her jobs? Well, not quit yet, but in 2 weeks her life was going to be completely different. Lily came running in from the bedroom where she'd been coloring. Mama, who was on the phone? You look funny. Rachel pulled her daughter into her lap and hugged her tight. Baby, Mama got a new job. A really good job. Things are going to get better for us. Will you still be tired all the time? That question broke Rachel's heart a little. No, sweetie. I won't be tired all the time anymore. I'll be home more. We can have dinner together every night. And maybe, just maybe, we can get you those art supplies you've been wanting. Lily's eyes went wide. The good markers? The ones with 100 colors? Maybe even those, Rachel laughed. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. Rachel gave Tony her notice, and he was sad to see her go, but happy for her. Several regular customers hugged her and wished her well. She finished out her last piano lessons at the community center, and both times Daniel and Sophie came. They were getting better at playing together, and watching them made Rachel's heart feel full. On her last day at the diner, Tony gave her an envelope with an extra week's pay. For everything, he said gruffly. You're one of the good ones. Rach, don't forget about us little people when you're running the world. She cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes after that, Monday morning of her first day at the new job. Rachel dropped Lily off at school and drove to the community center. Daniel met her there with a woman named Patricia who worked in HR. They'd set up a small office for her in what used to be a storage room. It wasn't fancy, but it had a desk, a computer, and a window. This is yours, Daniel said. We'll get you whatever supplies you need. Computer, phone, files, whatever. Patricia will help you set everything up and explain the benefits package. I'll be back this afternoon to talk about the renovation plans for the center. Patricia was efficient and kind. She walked Rachel through health insurance options, retirement plans, paid time off. Rachel kept having to remind herself this was real. She had health insurance. She had vacation days. She had a retirement account. After Patricia left, Rachel sat alone in her tiny office and looked at the nameplate someone had already put on her desk. Rachel Morrison, Program Director. She touched it gently like it might disappear. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. You've got this. Believe in yourself the way I believe in you. She smiled and got to work. There was so much to do. She needed to figure out what instruments the program needed, start reaching out to music teachers who might want to join, create an application process for students. It was overwhelming, but in a good way, in a way that made her feel alive for the first time in years. Around lunchtime, there was a knock on her door. Sophie peeked her head in. Can I come in? Of course. What are you doing here?
Shouldn't you be at school?
Half day today. Teacher training. Dad's in a meeting upstairs, so he said I could come visit you. Sophie walked in carrying a small gift bag. I brought you something for your first day. Inside the bag was a coffee mug that said World's Best Teacher and a small potted plant. So your office doesn't look so empty, Sophie explained. And so you remember that you're the best teacher ever. Rachel hugged the girl tight. Thank you, sweetie. This is perfect. Sophie pulled back and looked at her seriously. Are you happy? In your new job? I am. Really happy. Good. Because my dad's been happy too, since he met you. He smiles more now. And we eat dinner together every single night. Sometimes he even makes jokes. Bad jokes, but still. Sophie grinned. I think you're good for us. Rachel didn't know what to say to that. Before she could figure it out, Daniel appeared in the doorway. There you are. Sophie, I told you not to bother Rachel on her first day. She's not bothering me, Rachel said quickly. She brought me office decorations. Daniel looked at the mug and the plant, then at his daughter with such fondness that Rachel had to look away. The love between them now was so clear, so different from that first night when Sophie had sat crying in the lobby. Well, if you're not too busy, I wanted to show you the renovation plans, Daniel said. We're going to knock out this wall here, expand the music rooms, add soundproofing. The contractor says we can have it done in 6 weeks. They spent the next hour going over blueprints and ideas. Daniel listened to every suggestion Rachel made, taking notes, asking questions. He treated her like an expert, like her opinion mattered. It was strange and wonderful at the same time. As they talked, Rachel realized something. Her life had completely changed because she'd made one simple choice. She'd seen a sad child and decided to help. That's all. She hadn't done it expecting anything in return. She'd just done what felt right. And somehow that one act of kindness had led to all of this. A new job. A new future. New hope. Maybe that's how life works sometimes. Maybe kindness had a way of coming back to you when you least expected it. 6 months later, Rachel stood at the back of the community center's renovated auditorium, watching 23 children rehearse for their first recital. The space looked completely different now. New floors, proper lighting, acoustic panels on the walls, and 6 beautiful pianos of varying sizes. It still felt like a dream sometimes. A little boy in the front row kept hitting the wrong notes, getting frustrated with himself. Rachel walked over and knelt beside him. Hey Kevin, remember what I told you? Mistakes are just part of learning. Try it again, slower this time. The boy nodded and started over, this time getting it right. His face lit up with pride. Rachel squeezed his shoulder and moved on to check the other students. These kids came from all over the city. Some had parents who worked 3 jobs like she used to. Some lived in shelters. Some had never touched a piano before joining the program. But they all had one thing in common. They loved music, and now they had a chance to pursue it. The program had grown faster than anyone expected. What started as a small initiative at one community center now had a waiting list of over 200 kids. Daniel's company had already begun renovation on the 2nd location, and there was talk of opening a 3rd by next year. Rachel had hired 4 other teachers, all of them musicians who understood struggle, who taught with patience and heart. She'd created a scholarship fund that had already sent 2 talented teenagers to prestigious summer music camps. The local news had done a story on the program last month, and donations had poured in from people all over the state. Her life looked nothing like it had 6 months ago.
She and Lily had moved into a small house with a yard.
Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Lily had her own bedroom, painted purple at her request with those 100-color markers she'd wanted spread across a real desk. Rachel's medical debt was almost paid off. She had savings in the bank for the first time in her adult life. But the best part wasn't the money or the house. It was the time. Time to pack Lily's lunch in the morning. Time to help with homework in the evening. Time to just sit and talk about their days. Time to be a mom without being exhausted all the time. They sound wonderful, a voice said behind her. Rachel turned to see Daniel walking into the auditorium. He came by at least twice a week to check on things, always genuinely interested in how the program was developing. Sometimes Sophie came with him, and she'd sit at one of the pianos and practice. The girl had gotten quite good over the past months. They're nervous about Saturday, Rachel said. First recital jitters, they'll be great. You've prepared them well. Daniel watched the children for a moment, then said, Can we talk for a minute? In your office? Something in his tone made Rachel nervous. Is everything okay? Is the company having second thoughts about the program? No, nothing like that. I promise, just let's talk privately. They walked to her office, which she'd decorated with photos of her students and drawings they'd made for her. Daniel sat in the chair across from her desk, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. What's going on? Rachel asked. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I've been wanting to say something for a while now, but I didn't want to make things weird or uncomfortable. Especially since we work together, sort of. But Sophie keeps telling me I'm being ridiculous and I should just be honest. So here goes. Rachel's heart started beating faster. These past 6 months, getting to know you, watching you build this program, seeing how much you care about these kids. Rachel, you're one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. And somewhere along the way, I stopped just admiring you as a colleague and started having feelings for you. Real feelings. Rachel stared at him, unable to speak. Daniel continued quickly. I know this might be completely one-sided. I know you might not feel the same way at all. And if that's the case, we can pretend this conversation never happened. I'll be professional, I won't make it awkward, I promise. But I had to tell you because Sophie said I'd regret it if I didn't, and my 10-year-old daughter has apparently become wiser than I am. A laugh bubbled out of Rachel before she could stop it. Sophie told you to do this? She's been telling me for 2 months that I should ask you out. She says you look at me the same way I look at you, which I didn't even realize I was doing, but apparently I do it constantly. Daniel smiled sheepishly. Am I making a complete fool of myself right now? Rachel shook her head slowly. No, you're not. She took a deep breath. I didn't want to say anything either because you're technically my boss and I didn't want to risk this job, or the program, or anything. But Daniel, I have feelings for you too. I have for a while now. The relief on Daniel's face was immediate. Really? Really? You're kind and thoughtful and you've changed your entire life for your daughter. You gave me an opportunity when you didn't have to. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. How could I not have feelings for you? Daniel stood up and walked around the desk. Rachel stood too, and suddenly they were very close. So what do we do about this? He asked softly. I don't know. I've never dated someone I work with, or someone who funds the program I run. It feels complicated. What if it doesn't have to be? What if we just take it slow, see where things go? No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people who like each other spending time together. Rachel thought about it. She thought about Sophie, who she'd grown to love like her own daughter. She thought about Lily, who asked about Mr. Hayes and Sophie all the time. She thought about how happy she felt when Daniel walked into a room, how much she looked forward to his visits, how right this felt despite all the logical reasons to be cautious. Okay, she said. Let's try. Daniel smiled, and it was the most genuine, happy smile she'd ever seen on his face. Yeah? Yeah. But we tell Sophie right away because I have a feeling she already knows. She definitely already knows. Daniel laughed. She's been planning our first date for weeks, apparently. She has a whole list of restaurants we should try. They were both laughing when Sophie burst through the office door. I knew it! I knew you finally told her. She ran to Rachel and hugged her. Does this mean we can all have dinner together? Like a real family? Rachel looked at Daniel over Sophie's head, and he looked back at her with such warmth that she felt tears prick her eyes. Maybe we can start with one dinner and see how it goes, she suggested gently. Can Lily come too? Sophie asked. I've been wanting to meet her forever. I think Lily would love that. Saturday evening came and the recital was a beautiful success. Every child played their piece, some perfectly and some with mistakes, but all of them with heart. Parents cried happy tears. Teachers hugged their students. The local paper took photos for an article they were writing. Rachel stood at the side of the stage watching her students take their bows and felt overwhelming gratitude. She thought about that Monday night 6 months ago, when she'd seen a crying girl in a lobby and decided to help. Such a simple choice, such an ordinary act of kindness. She had no way of knowing then that it would change everything, that it would lead to a new career, a new home, a new life, that it would lead to Daniel and Sophie becoming part of her family, that it would give hundreds of children opportunities they never would have had otherwise. After the recital, they all went to dinner together. Rachel and Lily, Daniel and Sophie. They squished into a booth at a family restaurant and the 2 girls hit it off immediately, chattering about school and music and their favorite movies. Daniel reached under the table and took Rachel's hand and she squeezed back. Happy? He whispered. So happy, she whispered back. Lily looked over at them and smiled. Mama, are you and Mr. Hayes holding hands? Rachel felt her cheeks warm, but before she could answer, Sophie jumped in. Yes, they're dating now. Isn't it great? We're going to be best friends and our parents are going to be together. And we can have sleepovers all the time. Sophie, Daniel said, we talked about not getting ahead of ourselves. But Dad, it's going to happen. I can tell. Rachel makes you happy and you make her happy, and Lily and I are already best friends. It's perfect. Rachel and Daniel looked at each other and started laughing. Maybe Sophie was right. Maybe it was perfect. Not in a fairy tale way where everything was easy and simple, but in a real way where two broken people had found each other and were building something beautiful together. That night, after they'd said goodbye and Rachel had tucked Lily into bed, she sat at their piano. The one Daniel had insisted on buying for their new house so she could practice at home. She played softly, letting the music flow through her fingers. She thought about all the years of struggle, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the fear that things would never get better. She thought about David and how much she'd loved him, how his loss had nearly broken her, but somehow she'd kept going. She'd kept showing up, kept being kind, kept helping others even when she barely had anything herself, and that kindness had come back to her in ways she never could have imagined. The music filled the small house, and Rachel smiled. This was her song now, not one of loss and struggle, but one of hope and new beginnings. A song that said broken things could be mended, that sad endings could lead to happy beginnings, that one moment of compassion could ripple outward and change everything. She played until her fingers grew tired, and then she went to bed feeling peaceful and grateful and loved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to navigate. But tonight, everything was exactly as it should be, and it had all started with a simple choice to help a crying child in a lobby. To see someone hurting and decide that leaving them alone wasn't an option. To play the piano for a girl in crisis, completely unaware that her billionaire father was watching. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest miracles. Rachel had learned that lesson well, and she would carry it with her for the rest of her life.